All right, so let's go here to our home screen. So instead of this dummy data, I'm just going to delete all these data what we have in our hand. Let me delete this. And instead of console logging it, I'm just going to say set data. We need to update this category. So let me delete. So let me delete this. Set categories is equals data. Okay, so now what we need to do, we need to update this data into categories, and instead of sending this data, I'm just going to say categories. So save the changes. So it's loading now. Okay, but it's not displaying the images. The reason is because we need to send your what is that, you can see. So we're having this image field, right? We're having this image field. We need to use the image URL use URL for. We created a function use URL for to fetch the image, right? So we need to get that image and we need to display it over there. So let's get to our masonry and the place where we are displaying the image. This is the place that we are displaying the image. So we need to wrap that thing into our URL for function. So let's get back to that and then wrap that function over there. So now what we need to do, cut it and use that URL for, and then supply that inside here, not image URL. In this case, the field name is going to be image. So I'm just going to say data.image. Then all I have to say is get that URL. We're going to get that CDN and supply this URL. Save the changes, and now that should display the images, their respective images. So it's taking some time to load the image, but now it's successfully loading that image over here. So now all we have to do is so currently it's displaying the categories, right? So once we tap that categories, we need to bring the list of images which is comes under that categories, right? So but right now the UI what it's showing, if I tap anything, it's going to this screen. So instead of going to that screen, what we need to do is we need to navigate, we need to go to the screen. Again we're going to load the same screen, but on that screen we're going to load the items which belongs to that specific category. So let's fetch the items which belongs to that specific categories. So we'll go and write the queries for that first. So let's go to our server desk over here, go to the server vision, and for the category, which one we having, items, I think I added the items for landscapes and as well as the animals. So let's go here, let's find out the landscapes. Where is the landscapes? Baby, travel, cars, landscape, here it is. So this is the ID. So let me copy this ID. All right, so then now what we need to do is, all we have to do is to write the query to get the category based on the category ID. We need to get the items based on the category ID. So instead of this, I'm just going to say, let me get the items. We're going to get the items. So here, instead of category, I'm going to say items, and the field, we're going to supply the ID. This ID, it's going to be inside that. We're gonna send an ID over here, which is basically that ID, the landscape ID. All right, so we don't need to supply this. All we have to do is to send this complete ID. Okay, we send that ID. After this double quotes, what we need to do is, this ID should be inside in the category, in the category array. Inside the category array, we have a very because this is an ID, you need to search only in the ID field. It should fetch the matching ID field. So category is an array, and go inside that category array and try to find out in this matching field. Okay, so basically we are trying to get everything from the items, and as well as we are trying to find out only for the matching field this particular ID. So this ID should be inside the category array and it should match this ID field. All right, so now let's execute this query. Fetch. So it's showing 0 items. Why? I think we made a mistake. Maybe a mistake in the ID name. Yep. So let me copy this and let me paste it over here one more time. So let's bring the category, delete everything, and let me bring the category, fetch, Okay, so where is that um, category? Landscape, this is that category. So I'm just going to copy this, copy, and let me go here. And now instead of this, I'm just going to enter. Let's break it. Okay, so now we have that ID and in operator and everything. So let's fetch it. So now you can see it's showing 4 items which is belongs to that specific ID. So the query which we are trying to return, it's working perfectly. Now it's displaying only this specific ID. But the problem over here is we are not going to search only for this specific ID. That ID should be dynamically supplied from whenever I'm tapping this information. So I need to send this value as a dynamic parameter. So let's see how to update this query by using a dynamic parameter. So let me copy this from here, copy, and let's go to the sanity.js. So right after here, we're gonna export one more function, export const get category items by ID equals. So we're going to supply the ID dynamically inside over here, and this function is going to be an async function. And open the tab. So here inside this, what's an issue? Export, why it's showing an issue over here? Async. Yep, async spelling wrong. That's the reason. So now what we need to do is, so just like the same way, I'm just going to say await client dot fetch. I'm going to supply that URL over here, but what we're going to do is, instead of using normal single quotes, I'm going to use the string literals, which is backtick, and paste it over here. So let me bring it in a straight line here, and this is supposed to be over here, and this is supposed to be over here, but not this ID. Instead of this ID, I'm going to send a dynamic parameter. So in that case, I'm just going to say $ID. Okay, so this $ID will be replaced by our ID which we are passing over here. So then if the data is fetched properly, we need to return that data. So let's return that data. If there is any error while doing this, so this should be wrapped inside this brackets. So if there is any error while doing this, so we need to handle that error, but we'll handle that error in the front end, so no issues. So this will return the data. So let's get that data over here, items equals, say the changes, and we need to return the items outside. And of course, at last, at the end, what we need to do is, we haven't added this dynamic parameter value for this dynamic parameter. So right after this, add a comma and open an object params, because you can see it's a query string. We supply the query string, then you need to supply the parameter. So this is the parameter we have, so we need to supply the parameter. In this case, I'm just going to say ID. In case if you are using different parameter and different value over here, so you need to specify that name, just like this ID colon, we can supply that ID name. In this case, both are same, so we can use this. You don't need to supply it in that way. You can directly give the name itself. So this parameter will replace this ID value over here. Okay, so now what we need to do is, whenever I'm tapping this information, that information needs to send an ID to another screen. So we need to build another screen so that we can display all the informations according to that specific category. So let's go ahead and create another screen, and that screen is going to be our items screen, the place where we're going to display all our items. So let's create a new item screen, items screen, JSX, and RNFE, React Native functional export. Go to your app.js. So this is the place. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it right after over here, and this is going to be our item screen. Copy this name and paste it over here. And since this is coming from directly from our component, so we need to add this in our index.js as well. So copy this and paste it and change this to item screen. and give a name as item screen by default, save the changes and go here, and now import it one more time, and that will come from that import statement itself. So save the changes. Now we have our item screen. Okay, so now, but the problem over here is when I click tab, it's directly navigating to our another screen, which is our items. This particular screen, it's taking us to item. But what we need to do is, so when I'm tapping it, instead of taking it to the item, the screen should be updated dynamically, right? So this, because since this masonry layout is a reusable component, we're going to use the same layout just for our category and as well as for our item screen. So instead of repeating this entire stuff, we can update the data and we update this screen information. So to achieve that, what we're going to do is, so instead of sending directly to the masonry layout along with the category, I'm sending one more parameter called screen. Which screen I need to load? So I need to load this item screen. Whenever I'm fetching the data for categories, so it's going to display the categories and it's going to show the item screen. But inside the item screen, I will call the masonry layout and I'll use the different screen. So because right now we are inside the item screen, so when from the item screen, if I call the masonry layout, so it should tap and it should navigate the user to the different screen. Okay, so you will understand once we're done with the complete example. So screen over here, right now we are using the item screen. So save this property. So copy this, save it, and let's get back to the masonry layout. And here, expand it and send. We need to use the screen layout. Okay. So now what we need to do is, we need to update the screen whenever we are tapping this information. So instead of hard coding the item screen over here, I'm going to supply the screen information. And through the parameter, instead of supplying this ID, I'm going to send the underscore ID because that is the place where we are having our ID, right? So now whenever I tap this, that will send the ID and it will take the user to this item screen. So now inside the item screen, I need to fetch the information which I need to display. So I need to get that ID first. So let's get that ID and let's see whether we are getting that ID or not. So let's go to the item screen over here and we need to get the navigation. And by default, whenever the navigation router will provide you this route property, let's extract that route property and we're just going to say const ID is equals, we'll get that ID, const ID is equals route question mark dot params dot param, because that is the object that we are sending from there. Okay, so if you go to your masonry layout, you can see that's the object name that we are sending. So route.params is the default and this is the parameter which we are sending. That's our custom name. So save the changes and let's get that console.log ID. So through for it's not showing any issue. Let's open the terminal and let's get back here and we can see it's showing something that, okay, it's showing the ID, oh sorry, the data. Now if I click tap, if I tap this, we are getting an error, property screen does not exist. So why it's showing the screen is it does not exist. So where it's showing screen, okay, this is the screen and we are using the screen inside the card item, so that screen needs to be passed inside the card item as well. So screen equals to screen, right? Because see, we are inside the masonry layout. Inside the masonry layout we have one more component, that is our card component. You need to send the card component to the screen to your card component, so there only we are handling that information. So that's the reason it's showing an error. So save the changes and now if I tap this and it's showing still the screen is doesn't exist. Why? We updated this information. Okay, so I haven't fetched the property, my bad. So here I need to fetch the property, screen properties. We send this property but we haven't received it. It's very bad. So if I tap this now and now we can see we are inside the item screen and we have our ID over here. So now using this ID, I need to fetch the information from the Sanity. So I need to send this ID to this method so I can fetch that all the details which matching for this particular ID. So let's go ahead and do that now.